My name is Kim McQuarrie, and I'm the Director of Community Programming and the Co-Director of the Innovation Labs here at the Dalí Museum. Today, we're so happy to welcome you back for a new episode of our bi-monthly podcast, Follow the Tangent, Art, Archives, and Anecdotes. In each episode, we are delving a little bit more deeply into museum life, thinking about the art, the stories that we have here at the museum about Dalí, the other surrealist artists, cool things that we're doing, and learning more about the great resources we have here in our library and archives. And today, I'm super happy to be joined again by a previous guest, and that is my colleague, Kelsey Halbeck, who is our curatorial project manager at the Dalí. Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you for having me, Kim. Welcome back to the library.
Yes, I'm always happy to be here. One of my favorite places. So today, I wanted to talk about a really cool project that you and our other colleague, Shayna, have been working on. And it definitely employs our archives and library in what I would say would be like a traditional and a non-traditional way in some ways, because it's a traditional way of using the archives, but maybe with a non-traditional set of users. So recently we launched an initiative to encourage our employees to produce original scholarship on Dalí. So can you tell us a little bit about the genesis of this project?
Yeah, so the Avant-Garde Studies Journal is our online publication that we've had going on since 2015. We always try to shoot for an issue annually. Sometimes it happens, sometimes it doesn't, and we do get a mixed bag of writers.
Mhm.
And the reason why employees are the writers for this issue is our director, Dr. Hank Hine, requested it. And it's a fitting topic for employees to write on. So last summer, he had an intern. Her name was Jackie Henneke, and her project while she was with him was to find the baseline for how Dalí has influenced um, pop, or not just pop art, but pop culture today, how that legacy has lived on. Because, we found there really wasn't a ton of scholarship out there on it quite yet. So why not start it here?
Very cool. Now, knowing that as context and knowing, this was an idea that Hank had about involving the staff, more deeply in this topic. What exactly were they asked to do? Like, what was their task?
Okay, so once it got approved for employees to work on this, they were asked to submit a thesis. This opportunity was made open to anyone at the
Mhm.
museum, even our volunteers who may have wanted to write. And once their thesis was approved by Shayna, because this is really Shayna's project, um, she then gave the okay, and they were asked to write a 3 to 4,000 word paper on any modern cultural reference that can be directly or indirectly linked to Dalí's influence and or Surrealism's influence.
Very cool. Now, obviously, um, we're sitting here in the library, our library and archives collection. How did the employees and the other writers avail themselves of the resources that we have available? And how did they utilize you and Shayna in order to carry out this research?
They were allowed and scheduled at least 2 hours in the library that were solely dedicated to working on this. And in that 2 hours, they could use us however they needed, whether that was as a sounding board or please pull this. What do you think about this? That's how we helped out with it. And we really just served as shepherds to
Mhm.
guide them because the topics were so varied that often it wasn't a straight answer we could give them.
Mhm.
It was more of a, okay, this is what you're doing. This is how we can help you. Let's try these sources. So we pulled a lot of exhibition catalogs because that was what meshed with the topics we were
Mhm.
discussing. As for our archive materials, newspaper clippings was about as far as it went, just because with the topics, it didn't seem conducive to go backwards. That
Mhm.
really didn't serve them. They had to move forward. So if the archives could have been of help, that was great. But more often than not, it was our knowledge and books from the library.
So, Kelsey, you mentioned that there were a wide variety of topics that were submitted and that people decided to write papers on. So, could you tell us a little bit about the papers that you received, the topics,
Yes.
the areas they explored?
Yeah, it was definitely not topics we were expecting. We had a couple on Dolly and film, which was in line with maybe what we thought was going to show up, and another paper on Dolly's influence on contemporary artists, which was still in that same vein. But we also had a great proposal about Dolly and comic books, Dolly and tarot, Dolly and gender and the art of drag. I even wrote a paper, and it's on the connections between Dali and Yayoi Kusama.
Mhm.
So we have all these little fun avenues that were explored.
Um, I don't know if this is something that you've thought about, but do you see any common threads? Any, even despite the fact that they're kind of like a wide variety of topics, do you see any commonalities in what people were
Um,
exploring?
Not yet. I myself has not have not made my way through the papers, so off the top of my head, I'm going to say no. But I am genuinely impressed with what our writers came up with and the
Mhm.
connections they made, and Um, I really thought, like, right off the bat, there would be some standard commonalities, but not one is coming to mind as
Mhm.
of yet.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think we just have such a diverse group of people working here that it's not surprising to me that the perspectives represented, represent people's interests,
Yeah.
which I think is really cool. Now, what is the next step in terms of this? Like, what you mentioned the avant garde journal.
hmm
So eventually, people who are watching this are going to be able to access these papers and be able to read them for themselves.
Yes. So, next steps, we know this issue will be released in spring. We don't have a
Mhm.
hard date yet, but that'll be coming soon. Right now, we have all the papers, and they're going through their first round of being proofread. We have a great group of volunteers who are taking care of that for us. And then, after they've been proofread, they will be passed on to Shayna and Dr. Jeffett, our curator, and they will go through for content
Mhm.
for any factual inaccuracies, just to double check that all that information is right and make any suggestions that need to be made, wait for the revisions to come in, and then it gets to be published.
That's amazing. So, especially, I think this question is interesting because you mentioned that you are a participant in this process. So, now that you've kind of like been through this process and have seen it from beginning to not end, but we're nearing there, we're getting there. What do you think are the benefits, both for the staff who are participating and for the museum itself?
So for the staff, I think this was a great exercise to increase research skills, writing skills, maybe get them out of their comfort zone a little bit,
Mhm.
because without revealing positions and names, a lot of the writers were not in roles that required a lot of writing and research. So I think for the staff, those are some things that would be beneficial, as well as that start of the research of how did Dolly's legacy continue in maybe not the most obvious of ways.
Mhm.
And then as a museum, it helps increase our scholarship. I don't know if there's a lot of other museums doing a digitally published journal such as we are, but it will help us get more information out there. So,
Yeah, I think that's amazing, and I think we're seeing it more and more in museums, and I think specifically, I think it was Baltimore who did the exhibition where the security guards curated the exhibition. And then I know here we did our coffee with the curator as well, where we had staff perspectives. And then I
mhm,
think this is yet another extension of that, where people are realizing that sometimes the perspectives that are brought by so called non experts are revelatory of things that people who are trained as curators and researchers don't always see.
I agree with that. I do. And that was one of the reasons Hank was really excited to
Mhm.
have other employees outside of curatorial contribute to this.
Oh, amazing. Well, I want to absolutely thank Kelsey for joining us for this episode of Follow the Tangent. I think it's a very special episode when we get to focus on the amazing people who work here and all of the cool things that they do, both in the roles that we know them for, whether that is shipping and receiving, or working in visitor experience, or working in the store, but realizing that all of our employees have these diverse experiences and perspectives that they bring here to the job, and they're taking those interests and turning them into scholarship that's going to be published. So I love this. And I want to thank our viewers for tuning in, and be sure to catch our next episode on YouTube, or you can also catch us later on Facebook. Thanks and have a great day.